right? From being an astronaut. But I'm going to start off by asking you a question that I frequently ask myself. And that question is, what difference does it make if you have a place at the table and you act just like everyone else and you mind your table manners? So when people say, hey, Dr. J, it was really great, you went into space. What difference would it make when I came to the astronaut program if I didn't use my experience of having worked in developing countries, of having been an MD, of having gone to Chicago public schools? If I didn't use that to the questions, the solutions, the thoughts we had in space exploration, what difference would it make if I had been an astronaut and I came out and I did not use what I had learned in the astronaut program to the solutions that came up about safety, about the environment, right? About how do you work with different people. What difference did it make? So that's what I want you to do as well, to ask yourself those questions. So let me just tell you where I am right now. I believe that pursuing an extraordinary tomorrow creates a better world today. And you guys can put up my slides because they're beautiful and you're wasting them. Okay. We should go back and show you that one by itself. Okay. I believe pursuing an extraordinary tomorrow creates a better world today. And that's really what we're pushing at. When we think about the Executive Alliance and the whole push for excellence, it's really not just about getting the ordinary things done. It's about how do we push for things better. And let me tell you a little bit more about who I am. I grew up during a time when our potential seemed limitless. I grew up during the 1960s. And let me just tell you what the 60s were like, right? Everybody talks about the 60s as anarchy, but I really think it was about creativity. We were changing things. The world was changing. Every day people were breaking speed records, right? Whether it was on the ground with people running track and field, whether it was on the ground with land records being broken by cars and vehicles, or whether it was in the air, we were breaking records. We were finding new subatomic particles everywhere. And across the world, there was decolonialization. There was a civil rights movement. Here, there was a women's movement. We were changing culture, art, music. All of those things were changing. So I'm really a child of that, right? I wasn't quite old enough to really be in the groove with it, with a hippie, but I was always disappointed with that. But that's who I am, right? That's the way I see the world. That's the whole piece around the creativity. Tell you the truth, full disclosure, I play with Barbie dolls. Hey. Love Barbie dolls. But I also play with chemistry sets. An original series Star Trek fan. I pondered the concepts of infinity and the Big Bang. This is who I was. I'm a little girl who used to lie outside on a summer's night and I would stare up at the stars with all my young imagination and intensity on the south side of Chicago. And I also remember the riots that happened in Chicago in 1968 following Martin Luther King's assassination. The Democratic National Convention had been held in Chicago that year, which was infamous. I remember being afraid for my father who had gone to work that day because the National Guard were marching behind the vacant lot that was near my home. And there had been shoot-to-kill orders that had been issued because of the riots. But being a little kid, just like every child, I was filled with this enthusiasm. I wanted to go into space. I assumed I would go into space. I loved dancing. I wanted to dance like Judith Jamison, Lola Falana. I loved Jerome Robbins. I was sure I was going to be in West Side Story. All of those kinds of things. And of course, I love dinosaurs, right? Because what little kid doesn't like space and dinosaurs? And to tell you the truth, I was able to make it. I was able to get there. So these are my proof of pictures. I assumed that I would go into space, and I made it, right? But here's the thing. I wouldn't have made it without the help of others, right? Here's the perspective. I was a very bright little girl, but I did a couple of things. I chose my parents right. Because you can't do it without some support, right? We talk about mentoring of people from outside. So I have a little bit different concept of mentoring. I think of mentoring as being something that hardcore the people around you, but you can help episodically with lots of different things. But we need people to understand that nobody does all of this or does things on their own. Each one of us needs help, right? Because actually, a Yoruba proverb says, even the sharpest blade can't cut its own handle. Doesn't matter. That's where education comes about. That's where the mentoring and programs comes about. All of these things are important from that perspective. So let's talk about some of the work I do. I spend a lot of time working on science, technology, mathematics, engineering and mathematics literacy. Why do I do that? I do that because it's critically important to the world today. When I think about where we are, we have a world today that has an incredible amount of material wealth. Right? Today, we have more material wealth than in any other time as human civilizations. And yet, we have a world in where we say we want to include everybody in the wealth and the bounty, but do we really? We act as though we can't do it, but we can. And then when we do that, we point to science as a mechanism for doing it, right? STEM fields are going to help us do that. And in fact, right now, as we start to look at how to enhance human quality of life, we looked at STEM fields as the way to do that. Right? STEM is cutting a wide swath in our worlds. But here's the reality. We actually don't have enough people going into STEM fields. And I'm going to say enough people, not in terms of body count or numbers, but the diversity of people that have the expertise, the interest, the experience, the perspectives around the world. Let's think about this for just a second. When we talk about science literacy, people think we're talking about the next generation of professional scientists. That's not the case. Science literacy is the ability to read an article in the newspaper about a science subject, say it's climate, health, right? Your toxins, pollutants, anything about a science subject, and figure out how to respond to it. Just a lay article. Just the same way we assume everyone should be reading literate, they should be science literate. We don't assume that someone who's reading literate can write like Shakespeare or Alice Walker, right? We believe that they should be able to read effectively to get themselves through the day. The same thing should be true of science literacy. We want our hairdressers to know something about pH. These are the things that when we start to talk about this, we want to make sure that we're really clear. Now, there is a whole thing also about professional scientists. Research is a poke in and a prime with a purpose. I'm going to tell you, I'm channeling Zora Neale Hurston today because she managed to say a lot of things very succinctly. Zora Neale Hurston was an African-American anthropologist in the 1930s, and she wrote this book, Their Eyes Were Watching God, which you may have heard about. But she has some incredible things. She said on Dust Tracks in a Dirt Road, research is a poke in and a prying with a purpose. So what does that mean? That means that the scientists and the engineers who are conducting the research and the people who support and fund them get to choose some things. They get to choose the problems to be tackled, right? What you're researching, and the priority with which those things are researched. They get to choose the data sets that are kept, that are considered flawed, that are thrown out, that are analyzed. They get to choose those things. They get to choose the application of the solutions. This is what we're working with. That's the reason it's so important. Just think about what happens when you get to choose these applications and think about things. The folks who do this get to determine how these technologies, what technologies are developed and how they're used. Let's think about something. When I was in medical school, so we're going to get in the way back machine a long time ago, when I was in medical school, we talked about breast cancer. And the treatment for breast cancer at that time was a mastectomy. You take the entire breast out, you pull lymph nodes out, other things like that. And it was a very disfiguring surgery, and it also left a lot of frailties and things just because of the extensiveness of the surgery. It wasn't until you had more women involved that we got the lumpectomy, where you take the lump off and then you do radiation therapy, which is really the treatment of choice these days. It wasn't until you got more women involved. So I also remember when I was in medical school, them discussing testicular cancer. I remember something like, you can't just go cutting stuff out, you gotta pay attention. It makes a difference who's involved.
That's right.
Right? This is what I'm talking about, and it's not that it's one way or the other, it's the perspectives and the sensibilities that go along with it, what we use things for. Now, when I talk about science and technology, and I'm going to talk about a couple of things about women being involved in it, and I'm going to tell you about the work that I do. But I want to start off with giving you some perspectives about women not being involved. We know that women don't go through and aren't as, there are not as many women graduating in a number of technical fields in colleges and universities as there are males. But did you know that girls do as well or better than boys all the way through high school in math and science? And they enter colleges and universities wanting to go into it? So channeling Zora, I gotta tell y'all some truth, right? Zora said truth is a letter from courage, so I'm gonna have some courage here and I'm gonna tell you some stuff. This is true. This is about what we do. The reality is that the interest in the sciences is colorblind and gender blind, but along the way, some kind of way, women and people of color are derailed from following this. That's just reality. Little kids come out of the chute excited about the world around them. They pick up the bugs and snails and stuff in the couch, all the kinds of stuff, trying to be involved, right, and understanding the world around them. So what happens? I said, women do as well or better than boys all the way through high school, and they enter college. A lot of the professors say that women enter college the best prepared to complete a STEM degree. I put this eye chart only up because it reminds me to say that the place where most women and people of color are discouraged from college, from going into STEM fields, is in college. A survey of the American Chemical Society. These are the members of the American Chemical Society. These are the people who have their degrees already in chemistry and chemical engineering. The women and the minority members said the place where they received the most discouragement was in college by a college professor. Over 44% of them said that happened. These are the ones who made it. So can you imagine what's happening and what's going on? And so when the professors say, hey, I just don't know what's going on. Even though they think that women are the best prepared to graduate a STEM degree, something is happening when they're excusing their inability to develop this talent. We have to start really thinking about what we're saying and what we're pulling through. So let's do a couple of other ones. So sometimes we have some different ideas. There's something called the imposter syndrome. Some women believe that even when we're there, should I actually be here? Am I sort of like an imposter? Well, let me tell you, you did not slip in. They know you're there. They know you're you. And you're supposed to be there. So if you need anybody to help you get rid of that, let me just tell you that whole idea that some kind of way I shouldn't be there is just not true. Right? You have the skills and the ability. And that's something that we need to make sure that everybody knows. So why does that happen? There was something else that was on that eye chart that I showed before. It said that women have less confidence in themselves than their male counterparts do. It's really kind of interesting. Because a lot of times, guys act like they know what's going on, right? I was a professor at Dartmouth for a number of years. But they do, they say it. And I think that that's part of that whole issue about imposter syndrome, is whether or not we actively believe in ourselves, right? And that we're fooled by the bravado that's going on in other places. Letters of truth from courage. I'm going to keep going. Ambient belonging. So once we get there, and even though we feel like we're not an imposter, then maybe the situation, the environment is such that we don't feel comfortable in it, or we don't feel comfortable doing the things that we're interested in doing, right? So you have to, you make sure that you do the things that the guys validate. Let me just tell you a little story. I've never told this story before out in public. I'm going to tell it in front of God and everybody. Don't tweet it. But when I got to the astronaut program, I came from California, and I used to take incredible aerobic classes and things like that, really hard, really tough, really incredible aerobics classes. And we were going to LA. I was given the task for the astronaut class, the new candidates, to plan the trip to LA where we're going to visit all the various contractors and things like that. So, and then I also had to plan some of the entertainment and stuff. So there were like 15 of us in the class. There were 2 women, me and another woman. And I decided, hey, we're going to go to aerobics class. Any of you guys want to go, you can go to aerobics class. So I go to the aerobics class. This, oh my God, there was the best classes ever. But the teacher was a woman who was, she was sort of petite. She's hardcore, right? And so a couple of my Air Force buddies and stuff went with me. They were brave. I give it to them. But after they said it, after we had the class, they said, that wasn't fair because, she's small and she can do these steps faster than we can. Okay, but the reality is that ambient belonging, at that point in time, I said, you know what? I can't just do the things that they say are comfortable, that they're comfortable with. What about the pieces that are part of me, that are important to me? And I might have got some brownie points taken away because I couldn't believe that I'd say, yes, hey, I got some aerobics classes going. But at some point in time, you have to be comfortable asserting that your choices are also important in this world. I want to show you a series of pictures. I told you I like Star Trek, right? But this is not me, these are friends. I have friends who like Star Trek. I have friends who like Star Trek much more than, I never dressed up. Seriously. They like Star Trek so much that they went to the place where the Gorn episode was filmed. Anybody saw the original Star Trek? It was the one with the lizard. They found the place in LA where the Gorn episode was filmed. Right? Literally. I'm going to just show you so you can get it closer up. Here we go. See? There's Captain Kirk and the lizard person. And there they are, right? Exact same place. That's how much they like Star Trek. So, we were talking about ambient belonging. Let me just tell you the comments that were made. I did this because I love Star Trek. David did this because he loves me.
Aww.
Yeah. Bystander comment. You're the Trekkie? Usually it's the other way around. My friend said, yep. This time the geek is not the bespectacled Asian guy, but the dreadlock black chick. Most fun ever. This is Dr. Ronki Olabisi, who's a professor of biomedical engineering at Rutgers University, and her husband is a cardiovascular surgeon. But sometimes you're looking at this like, why he make her do that? And I have to say, Ronki, why you treat your pets like that? But this is the thing, and sometimes we have these perspectives of who ought to do what, who ought to like what, and we have to come back for a second and think through what we're doing. I want to do a couple of other things really quickly. I'm going to get a little bit closer to home, a little bit closer to truth, okay? All right? You give me permission to get, okay. This our day. So, I put the word genius up. Because how often do people use the word genius to describe women? Not very frequently. I always say males are geniuses, right? But women are rarely described as geniuses. They're described as brilliant, maybe brilliant, clever, smart, sassy. Even Hermione, Harry Potter, Hermione, she was always the one who was saving them. But she was just described as the cleverest witch of her age, right? I bring this up because sometimes words make a difference. And even the word genius, the single-minded behavior that we accept from male geniuses, males we call geniuses perhaps, we would not accept from women. And I just bring that up because we have to be really clear on what we're doing when we're talking about these things. And this isn't just in STEM, this is in a lot of areas. Parents and Google searches. I told you I chose my parents well. Parents Google twice as much, is my son a genius, as they do their daughter. Is my son behind? They Google twice as much. Think with it, what do they Google for daughters?
Oh my God.
Is my daughter fat? Twice as much. So you're like passing on a message, right? You know what the other one they do? Is my daughter ugly? I don't know how Google knows that, but how do you know what message are we passing when we do those kinds of things? Because it's not probably just within our secret Google search, there's probably other parts of our behavior that are pushing certain messages forward. Again, I bring those up because sometimes we have to look and understand those things that we do. Oh, we're going to get close to home. Male professors. You know what students describe when they say, my male professor is very good? They say, he's a genius. That's how they describe him. When they say, my female professor is really good, she nice. Think about what this means in terms of, and you guys can probably recognize this. You all can probably recognize some of this in its different formulations. There's also something called the Flynn effect, which talks about those things, those fields where you have to be innately brilliant. We just can't teach this, you just have to be born with the thing in your brain. Innately brilliant. Those are usually fields like physics, philosophy, computer programming, software design, development. They assume that you have to be innately brilliant. Interestingly enough, these are the fields where males have just this overwhelming percentage of. Philosophy, innately brilliant, you can't teach that. You know the fields where women predominate even in the sciences? You just have to be hardworking, like biomolecular, chemistry, right? You have to be pretty brilliant to do that. But it's a difference in how we categorize things. And I'm bringing that up all because I want us to look at ourselves and understand what we have to do. What's the pieces happening here? Because what we really have to do is to help each student to truly achieve their own level of excellence, to be the objective of all educators. This was from my mother. I will say that the other way. So here, it's not just about students, right? This executive alliance is about excellence in women. So what she would say is that we want to achieve our own level of excellence, right? To merely offer the goal to be number one is foolish. Sorry, I'll go back. I'm not sure if it's there. The achieve number is fun, and it fails to demand the best of everyone. Because if you're just comparing yourself to somebody else, you may not push yourself hard enough, right? So it's really about how do you get to your own level of excellence where you push yourself over and over again. This is where we start talking about empowerment and all of those kinds of things. I'm going to go to Zora again because this is also a piece. I love myself when I'm laughing, and I love myself when I'm looking mean and impressive. Sometimes we leave that part off as women, when I'm looking mean and impressive. You have to love yourself then too. You have to be willing to go to that step. Because this is where you get empowerment from. I believe that empowerment doesn't come from the position you have. And in fact, you can be in a certain position and you never feel empowered. Right? People always say, I want to be empowered to do X, Y, and Z. To be empowered, you have to believe that you have the right to be involved. That you have the right to be there. That's something inside of you that makes any position powerful. You have to believe that you have something to contribute. That's inside of you as well. If you don't have that belief that you have something to contribute, you can sit there and act just like everyone else and never make those contributions. Remember those times where you sit there and somebody else says something that you thought 20 minutes ago? You know what I'm talking about. Right? Because you're like, well, maybe it's not important to say. And then all of a sudden it's like, ooh, that was very thoughtful, Bob. You have to believe you have something to contribute. And finally, you have to risk making that contribution. You have to risk doing that. And those are the things that I really want to just ground, and then I'm going to talk about the work that I do. Because part of empowerment and part of being able to be here is to talk about the work that you do. So frequently with women, we talk about how do we get more women involved, but we never talk about the work we do and why it's important. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about the work that I do. I told you I got Zora. No matter how far a person can go, the horizon is still way beyond you. And that's what pushes me. You heard that I work on a project called 100-Year Starship. I lead 100-Year Starship, which is about making sure we have the capabilities for human travel beyond our solar system to another star in 100 years. The capabilities. It's not about a mission date. We don't have a launch date, but having the capabilities to be able to push. It's about really pushing innovation. I was fortunate enough to lead the team that won the modest seed funding from DARPA. And I would say that had it not been me, the project probably would not go the direction that it's going. And I would bet that a lot of folks may not have imagined when you were having the Geek Prize of 2011 that it would be someone like me that would lead the winning team. But I had to have the nerve to go on and do it, and then I had the nerve to talk about it. So let's talk about why interstellar is important, because we're talking about Mars right now, right? To tell you the truth, I was really irritated that I didn't go to Mars. When I was doing that, no, really. Anybody here from the 60s? Didn't you think we would be on Mars? By now, I'd be on Saturn. I'd just be hanging out as a scientist on Mars, right? I didn't work out that way. But why isn't it Mars that I'm talking about as the driver that's going to push us to these kinds of innovation? Because we know how to do Mars. Mars is not difficult. We basically have an engineering path. Where's Sheena? We basically have an engineering path. We know how to do Mars. We've been on Mars a couple of times. We've got its address, all that. There's some engineering challenges, yes, but it's not going to push us the same level as trying to go to another star. Let's talk about why. This is what going into space looks like now. The shuttle's not still flying, but you basically still have all these plumes of what looks like flame and smoke or vapor. That's another proof of picture, right? I'm on the mid-deck there, I'm waving out, you can see me closely. But that's what space looks like now. But getting to interstellar won't look that way. It will be something completely different. There is not enough chemical fuel in the entire solar system to get us to another star in the way we want. This is what space exploration looks like now. And the reality is, this is my final proof of picture, the reality is that if you didn't know I wasn't on the space station, that could look just like a picture off of the space station. And if you didn't know that I wasn't on Skylab happened when I was in high school. This could look just like a picture out of Skylab. That's the reason we have to push. Interstellar won't look like that. Interstellar will be as different from that as the space shuttle is from the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. And if you have a picture of yourself with Worf, you show it. But we're not going to find Worf. That's not what this is about. But we will have a completely different scenario. Let me tell you why it's different. Just talking about the scale of travel to another star. Think about Los Angeles and New York. Think about Los Angeles as being the equivalent of Earth, and New York being the equivalent of Alpha Centauri, which is our closest neighboring star. Alpha Centauri is 4.2 light years away. That's 25 trillion miles away. Light travels from the from the sun to the Earth in 8 minutes. Light travels from Alpha Centauri to the Earth in 4.2 years. Okay? The sun to the Earth is 93 million miles. We just want to get a little perspective on this. It's a long way away. Think about Voyager, which we've heard about. It's a probe that's just left our solar system. And I think it's one of the coolest things we've done. But Voyager's been traveling at over 35,000 miles per hour since 1977. And if you use this scale, it's only gone about a mile from LA to New York. It would take Voyager some 60 to 70,000 years to get to Alpha Centauri if it was headed in that direction. So we have to go much faster. We need a different technology because we weren't even cave painting well back then. right? So we need to be able to do something differently. That's the reason why it's an issue, because the challenges of interstellar travel, first of all, are the sheer distances. The distances are completely different than what we're used to. And if you look at those distances, it means that the time frame is different, because even if we're able to go 10% the speed of light, 20% the speed of light, it's still going to take us 20 years, 10 years to get there. We have to have something that's going to sustain human life independently for 20 years or more, 50 years or more. That's fundamentally different than what we do now. It's fundamentally different than any of the technology we have. And also, it means you have to be autonomous, independent, autonomous. If you get to going that fast, you're probably not going to be able to stop for groceries. You'll probably keep going. So you really have to figure out how this is going to work in terms of all kinds of things. And then 90% of it is dark. So all my folks out here with the physics, I'm going to just use a fudge factor. We talk about dark matter, right? And there's evidence that there's dark matter around, but we don't really know what it is. 90% of what's out there that makes our equations work, we don't actually know what it is. We have some of the characteristics, but we don't know exactly what it is. That's what we're doing. So that's a challenge. That's a challenge. Some of the issues are really about these extreme hurdles that make us reevaluate what we think we know. That's how you get a push in what we can do. It demands radical leaps in our knowledge, technology, systems, capabilities across every human discipline. If you just start to look at some samplings of these areas, they include things from energy. Remember I told you can't do it through chemical energy? You're going to have to generate enormous amounts of energy, but you're going to have to do it through fission, splitting atoms apart, fusion, what powers the sun, or antimatter. You're going to have to control it and store it. Imagine if we were able to do a little bit of that right now. What a difference would it make to life here on Earth? We have to do things like financial innovation and funding. We have to have a different model, because we're talking about something that doesn't have a regular ROI, right? It has a different ROI. So even if you talk about things like planetary resources, that we're going to go grab an asteroid, we're going to mine it and bring it back, it has an ROI that we're sort of familiar with. But what happens when we're pushing this hard? But that becomes something that we have to think about for life here on Earth as well. That's really what it is. And even thinking about human behavior. I can imagine we could get all the technical hurdles solved. Get 5,000 people on the ship. We're ready to go. Y'all put me to sleep in animation. 10 years out, you wake me up, and then I tell you I'm not doing that. Yeah, you were in charge when we left. Now make me. Right. But we have to figure that out. But we can talk about figuring out human behavior and teamwork on something like that, right? On a platform like that. If I came and talked about world peace, particularly at this time, you would laugh at me. But we got to figure these things out. That's the reason why I was so excited about 100-Year Starship. That's the reason I was so excited about interstellar travel, because when I heard about DARPA, if DARPA's doing something, you want to be involved anyway. If DARPA and I thought, I know how to do this. I know what some of the issues are. And the issues are not just about propulsion and engineering. In fact, the challenge of human interstellar travel mirrors the challenges that we face in the world today, because we're on a starship right now that has limited resources, right? And we're finding that out more and more every day, and we're having to figure out how to work on this. We're going to have to figure out how to invest in this. And all of the solutions go across disciplines. They don't just stay in one discipline. They don't even stay in the intersection of disciplines. They go across all of this. That's the reason why I'm so excited about 100-Year Starship and the work that we do. And I told you that probably if it hadn't been me working on this with my perspectives and experience, the project's title that one would not be An Inclusive Audacious Journey Transforms Life Here on Earth and Beyond, with the first word being inclusive. It has to be inclusive across ethnicity, gender, and geography, but also across disciplines. And we have to connect it back to life here on Earth. I mean, I am as thrilled to just hang out in space as the next person. Y'all just send me up there, I'm there. But the reality is In order to make long-term commitments, people have to understand how it's connected to their lives here on Earth. Space connected to you? I know this audience knows because y'all are around in here and stuff, but everybody in here has a smartphone, right? You have it with, it has something you ask Siri, Alexa, Bertha, somebody, how to get to one place or another, right? That's a global positioning satellite systems. You have a space receiver in your hand. We love weather satellites, right? Because they help us to understand what's going on. The reason why there wasn't more loss of life in Houston where I live with the hurricane that came in is because we had early warning about it. That's what we have to understand. It's not just about one thing or the other, right? It's about how it connects to our lives. And I even noticed, I know it was probably in my honor, but you had that slide for the donations with the earth and the horizon on it. But we can't see anything these days hardly without seeing the earth and a horizon and seeing the planet from above. Those are things that we see all the time. We've all had MRIs, magnetic resonance imaging, right? Basically, you put the body in a big magnet and you get electrical signals off of it, and then you have to turn those electrical signals into some kind of an image. Well, the algorithms that help to turn those electrical signals into an image are the same algorithms, were derived from the algorithms that turn the signals from scanning of Venus or other remote places in space into images. So it's a connection all the way, but we have to make sure that connection is known. That's the whole piece of it. I'm here talking with you about this because I believe that there is a better future. I mean, we all have to believe that in order to be around. I believe that there is a better future. And what we're trying to do with 100-Year Starship is to inspire a collective, inclusive ambition for all humanity. So when I think about this, for me, it's the reality that space is not a plan B. And we can't all get to Mars. For generations to come, our children, our grandchildren's children, and grandchildren's grandchildren's children are going to be on this planet. And even if we could get 5,000 people to Mars, which 5,000? Okay. What culture? What other things? And do we want to just have 5,000 people making them realize the rest of humanity and everybody go? So we've got to figure this particular piece out. And I think we have to figure out that we're all Earthlings. And I think that's what space exploration can help us think of ourselves as Earthlings. So what we were really doing was, yes, working on a mission to achieve human interstellar flight within the next 100 years, but it was really a journey designed to enhance life here on Earth, because that's where we need to be. Eugene Cernan said, we went to explore the moon, but in fact we discovered the Earth. And the question I would ask is, what would we discover from another star? That's what the purpose of 100-Year Starship is. We've been working on, we have lots of different programs. I invite you to go look at it. We are having some other programs that I hope that I can talk with you about. But I want to go back to why we're here today as well, in terms of the kinds of projects that are going on and what's happening. There was a quote, and I just changed this around. There was on the bookmark that was there, and I didn't know it was out, and it said, life is best when you live deeply and look up. I think that's true. Life is best when you look deeply and look up. Because you have to feel what's going on. You have to have compassion and empathy. You have to relate to what's happening. Sometimes if you're sad, you have to go on and feel sad, right? And then feel that happiness. You have to be connected to the world. And at the same time, I think we have to look up and know that there are things that are bigger than we are, and that we can collectively contribute to them. And you know I'm gonna have to end with some Zora. And I have two quotes from Zora because I like both of them. When I talked about the live deeply and look up, she said, I have been in sorrow's kitchen and licked all the pots. And then I have stood on the peaky mountain wrapped in rainbows with a harp and a sword in my hand. You have to do both of them, right? That's part of who we are. But finally, When you start to think about things that are bigger than you are, things that are about excellence, about how do you achieve leadership in all of those pieces, I think that she says, even in this helter-skelter world that is my life, I do not weep at the world because I'm too busy sharpening my oyster knife. And I love cats, and they think big. Thank you.